All right. Hmm. Okay. I was just checking if I'm audible or not. All right. So now let's just start from this very book that we are going to cover today, that is Trading in the Zone. And sometimes you can prepare. There are certain things that I want to, share before that directly jumping into the chapter itself. So the first thing is carpe diem, seize the day. And the second thing is don't wait for perfection. Just start doing things and you'll figure out your way. You'll reach the right places where you are meant to be and where you want to be. Okay, so never wait for a perfect time, just start it and you'll figure out your way. And that doesn't mean you are not supposed to, what I can say, do the things that are supposed to be done before starting a task, or like the preparation kind of thing. You can do that, but after you're done with your primary preparation, don't wait for perfect time and perfect things. Okay, just start it, just jump right into it and you'll figure your way out. Okay, and consistency and discipline over any other thing. That means that includes, what I can say, that includes talent also and hard work also. By hard work, what I meant is the short, if you are doing hard work for a short period of time and there is another guy who's doing, little bit of this, little bit of that in a particular direction for a consistent period of time, then he will be at a better position after a certain amount of time because he is consistent and he is putting small efforts in. But you, what you did, you put a hard work on one day, second day you lost your motivation, and let's say you did your thing for a little while and then you left it, so he will surpass you for sure. Okay, so consistency and discipline over anything. Trust this and do it for 1 year or so, and on the very first day and on the very last day you'll see the drastic change, and that too for good. Okay, now let's start the second chapter. So in the first chapter we have already covered certain things related to how the things are supposed to be done. So the last statement was learning process faster and easier, right? Possibility that you may not be aware of or may not have given enough consideration to will obviously make the learning process faster and easier. So in the first chapter itself, let me tell you what exactly we have covered. So we have covered like the shift of technical analysis. So we have covered like fundamental analysis, the basics of it, then technical analysis, and then comes the mental analysis. What is its significance and how it came into existence. Okay, and which one was having more value earlier and now which one is more prevalent. So it's more like you need to know everything and then you find out the right thing to work on, or like the right thing that can work for you. Okay, now let's start with the second chapter itself, which is basically the lure and the dangers of trading, right? In January 1994, I was asked to I was asked to speak at a trading conference in Chicago, sponsored by Futures magazine. At one of the luncheons, I happened to be sitting next to an editor for one of the major publisher of books about trading. We are having a lively conversation about why so many people become successful at trading, even people who are otherwise very accomplished. At one point, the editor asked me if a possible explanation for this phenomena might be that people were getting into trading for the wrong reasons. Okay, the attraction. All right. I had to pause for a moment to think about this. I agree that many of the typical reasons people are motivated to trade, the action, euphoria, desire to be a hero, the attention one can draw to himself by winning, or the self pity that comes from losing, create problems that will ultimately detract from a trader's performance and overall success. But the true underlying attraction to trading is far more fundamental and universal. Trading is an activity that offers the individual unlimited freedom of creative expression, a freedom of expression that has been denied most of us for most of our lives. Of course, the editor asked me what I meant by this. I explained that in the trading environment, we make almost all the rules. This means there are very few restrictions or boundaries on how we can choose to express ourselves. Of course, there are some formalities such as having to become a member of an exchange to be a floor trader, or meeting the minimum financial requirements to open a brokerage account if you are an off the floor trader. But otherwise, once you are in a position to start trading, The possibilities that exist for how you go about doing it are virtually limitless. I went on to give him an example from a seminar I attended several years ago. Someone had calculated that if you combine bond futures, bond options, and the cash bond markets, there would be over 8 billion possible spread combinations. Now, add the timing considerations based on how you read the revealing market condition, and the various ways to trade become virtually limitless. The editor paused for a moment and asked, but why would having access to such an unrestricted environment result in fairly consistent failure? I answered because ultimate unlimited possibilities coupled with the unlimited freedom to take advantage of those possibilities present the individual with unique and specialized psychological challenges that very few people are properly equipped to deal with or have any awareness for that matter. And people can't exactly work on overcoming something if they don't even know it's a problem, right? So if you're bleeding from some part of your body and you want to stop that, you want to put a bandage or you want to, cover it with some kind of cloth or something. First of all is, like, first thing first, basically what you have to do, you have to figure out from which part of your body the blood is coming out, right? Similarly, in the like trading environment, like a lot of people are getting the failure, but for everyone the reasons can be different. The psychological problems that they are not problem the psychological challenges that they are coming across can vary from person to person. You're only focusing yourself on the final result, if he's winning or he's losing, if she is winning or she is losing. No, there is a lot of things in between, right? So first of all, you have to find out your problem, where exactly the problem exists, and you have to figure out a way to tackle it if you really want to survive, right? If you just, again, terms and conditions are there, right? If you just want to do it out of thrill and you're doing it for once or a while, and you just want to, what I can say, want to do it just like a gambling or so, then there are nothing there is nothing you can do anything. There's no cap on anything for you. But if you really want to pursue it for a longer duration, then yeah, these are the things that you have to go through. Every successful trader has gone through this particular process. Okay, now let's move ahead. The freedom is great. All of us seem to naturally want it, strive for it, even crave it. But that isn't mm, mean, okay, this will be mean, M is, omitted over here. Okay, that doesn't mean that we have the appropriate psychological resources to operate effectively in an environment that has few, if any, boundaries, and where the potential to do enormous damage to ourselves exist. Almost everyone needs to make some mental adjustments, regardless of their educational background, intelligence, of how successful they have been in their in other endeavors. The kind of adjustments I'm talking about have to do with creating an internal mental structure that provides the trader with the greatest degree of balance between the freedom to do anything and the potential that exists to experience both the financial and psychological damage that can be a direct result of that freedom. Creating a mental structure can be difficult enough, especially if what you want to instill is in conflict with what you already believe. Again, it will start questioning your, you know belief system, and that will give you like a feeling of pain, and everybody wants to not feel painful, or you can say avoid pain in one way or another. So yeah, there is no room for growth and the way forward. Okay, all right. Now, but for those of us who want to be traders, the difficulty of creating the appropriate structure is invariably compounded by a backlog of mental resistance that starts developing at the very earliest stages of our lives. All of us are born into some sort of social environment. If you're wondering what I'm doing in between, so you've seen it in the past videos also, right? I'm just copy pasting the things that I feel like is important, right? So I'm just taking a note of it. Basically, I'm putting it in a PPT, right? So just give me a moment. Okay. Okay, but for those of us who want to be traders, the difficulty of creating the appropriate structure is invariably compounded by a backlog of mental resistance that start developing at the very earliest stages of our lives. All of us are born into some sort of social environment or society, whether it's a family, city, state, or country, implies the existence of structure. Social structure consists of rules, restriction, boundaries, and a set of beliefs that become a code of behavior that limits the ways in which individuals within that social structure can or cannot express themselves. Furthermore, most of the limitation of social structure were established before we are born. In other words, by the time any of us get here, most of the social structure governing our individual expression is in place and well entrenched. It's easy to see why a society's need for structure and the individual's need for self expression can conflict. Every person who wants to master the art of trading faces just such a fundamental conflict. I'd like you to ask yourself what one characteristics, a form of personal expression, is common to every child born on this planet, regardless of the location, culture, social situation the child is born into. The answer is curiosity. Every child is curious, every child is eager to learn. They can be described as little learning machines. Consider the nature of curiosity. At its most fundamental level, it is a force. More specifically, it is an inner directed force, which means there's no necessity to motivate a child to learn something. Left on their own, children will naturally explore their surrounding. What is more, this inner directed force also seems to have its own agenda. In other words, even though all children are curious, not all children are naturally curious about the same things. There's something inside each of us that directs our awareness. Even infants seem to know that, okay, even infants seems to know what they want and don't want. When adults encounter this unique display of individuality expressed by an infant, they're usually surprised. They assume that infants have nothing inside of them that makes them uniquely who they are. How else would infants express their individuality than by what in their environment attracts or repel them? I call this inner directed guidance the force of natural attraction. Natural attraction are simply those things about which we feel a natural passion or interest, natural or passionate interest. Ours is a big and diverse word, and it offers such each of us great deal of learn about an experience. But that doesn't mean each of us has a natural or passionate interest in living on and learning about an experience. All there is, there's some internal mechanism that make us naturally selective. If you think about it, I'm sure you could list many things to do or be that you have absolutely no interest in. I know I could. You should also make another list of the things you are only marginally interested in. Finally, you could list everything you have a passionate interest in. Of course, the list gets smaller as the interest levels rise. Where does passionate interest come from? My personal view is that it comes from the deepest level of our being, at the level of our true identity. It comes from the part of us that exists beyond the characteristics and personality traits we acquire as a result of our social upbringings. The dangers. It is at the deepest level of our being that the potential for conflict exists. The social structure that we are born into may or may not be sensitive to these inner directed needs and interests. For example, you may have been born into a family of extremely competitive athletes, but feel a passionate interest in classical music or art. You may even have natural athletic ability, but no real interest in participating in athletic events. Is there any potential for conflict here? In a typical family, most members would put a great deal of pressure on you to follow in the footsteps of your brothers, sisters, or parents. They do everything possible to teach you their ways and how to get the most out of your athletic ability. They discourage you from seriously pursuing any other interest. You go along with what they want because you don't want to be ostracized. But at the same time, doing what they want you to do just doesn't feel right. Although everything you have learned and been taught argues in favor of becoming an athlete. The problem is, it doesn't feel like who you are. The conflicts that result from what we are taught about who we are supposed to be, and the feeling that resonates at the deepest level of our being is not at all uncommon. I'd say that many, if not most people, grow up in a family and cultural environment that gives little, if any, objective, non judgmental support to the unique ways in which we feel compelled to express ourselves. This lack of support is not simply an absence of encouragement. It can be as deep as the outright denial of some particular way in which we want to express ourselves. For example, let's look at common situation. A toddler who, for the first time in his life, notices this thing, which we call a vase, on the coffee table. He's curious, which means there is an inner force that's compelling him to experience this object. In a sense, it's as if this force creates a vacuum in his mind that has to be filled with the object of his interest. So he focuses on the vase and, with deliberate intent, crawls across the vast expanse of the living room floor to the coffee table. When he gets there, he reaches up to the edge of the table to pull himself to his feet with one hand firmly on the table to maintain his balance. His other hand reaches out to touch this thing he has never experienced. Just at that moment, he hears a scream from across the room. No, don't touch that. Startled, the child falls back on his butt and begins to cry. Obviously, this is a very common occurrence and one that is completely unavoidable. Children have absolutely no concept of how they can injure themselves or how valuable something like a vase can be. In fact, learning what is safe and what isn't, and the value of things are important lessons a child must learn. However, there are some extremely important psychological dynamics at work here that have a direct effect on our ability to create the kind of discipline and focus necessary to trade effectively later in life. What happens when we are denied the opportunity to express ourselves in the way we want to, or we are forced to express ourselves in a way that doesn't correspond with the natural selection process? The experience creates an upset. Being upset implies an imbalance. But what exactly is out of balance? For something to be out of balance, there has to be something that's in balance or in equal proportion in the first place. That something is the relative degree of correspondence that exists between our inner mental environment and the exterior environment where we experience our lives. In other words, our needs and desires are generated in our mental environment and they are fulfilled in the exterior environment. If these two environments are in correspondence with one another, we are in a state of inner balance and we feel a sense of satisfaction or happiness. If these environments are not in correspondence, we experience dissatisfaction, anger, and frustration, or what is commonly referred as emotional pain. Now, why would not getting what we want or being denied the freedom to express ourselves in some particular way cause us to experience emotional pain? My personal theory is that needs and desires create mental vacuums. The universe in which we live has a natural tendency to not tolerate a vacuum and moves to fill it whenever one exists. The philosopher Spinoza observed centuries ago that nature abhors a vacuum. Suck the air out of a bottle and your tongue and lips will stuck to the mouth of the bottle because you have created an imbalance, a vacuum, which now must be filled. What are the dynamics behind the expression? Necessity is the mother of all invention. The recognition that a need creates a mental vacuum and the universe will fill with inspiring thoughts if your mind is receptive. The thoughts in turn can inspire movement and expression that result in the fulfillment of that need. In this respect, I think our mental environment works like the universe at large. Once we recognize a need or desire, we move to fill the vacuum with an experience in the exterior environment. If we are denied the opportunity to pursue the object of this need or desire, it literally feels as if we are not whole or that something is missing, which puts us into a state of imbalance or emotional pain. Do our minds also abhor a vacuum once one has been created? Take a toy away from a child who is not finished playing with it, regardless of how good your reasons may be for doing so, and the universal response will be emotional pain. By the time we are 18 years old, we have been on Earth approximately 6570 days, 6570 days. On average, how many times per day does the typical child hear statements like, "No, no, you can't do that. You can't do it that way. You have to do it in this way. Not now. Let me think about it. I'll let you know. It can't be done. What makes you think you can do it? You have to do it. You have no choice." These are just a few of the relatively nice ways in which all of us are denied individual expression as we grow up. Even if we only heard such statements once or twice a day, that still adds up to several thousand denials by the time we reach adulthood. I call these lands of experiences denied impulses. To learn impulses that are based on an inner need originating from the deeper part of our identity, from the natural selection process. What happened to all of these impulses that have been denied and left unfulfilled? Do they just go away? They can, if they are reconciled in some way. If we do something or someone else does something to put our mental environment back into imbalance, what can put our mental environment back into balance? There are a number of techniques. The most natural one, especially for a child, is simply to cry. Crying is a natural mechanism, nature's way for reconciling these denied, unfulfilled impulses. Scientific researchers have found tears to be composed of negatively charged ions. If allowed to take its natural course, crying will expel the negatively charged energy in our minds and bring us back to a state of balance. Even though the original impulse was never fulfilled, the problem is that most of the time events are not allowed to take their natural course and the denied impulses are never reconciled, at least not while we are still children. There are many reasons why adults don't like it when their children, especially boys, cry and do everything they can to discourage this behavior. There are just as many reasons why adults will not bother to explain to children why they are being forced to do something they don't want to do. Even if adults do try, there are no assurance that they will be effective enough to reconcile the imbalance. What happens if these impulses aren't reconciled? They accumulate. Okay, just reconciled as in it is a way of expressing, isn't it? To find a way of dealing with two ideas, situation statements, etc., that seems to opposite to each other, to make people become friends again after an argument. Okay. She finds it difficult to reconcile her career ambitions with her responsibility to her children. All right, understood. Partially understood. Two idea situation statements. Okay, contradictory things, I guess. Mm, that seems to opposite to each other. All right, contradiction. All right. They accumulate and usually end up manifesting themselves in any number of addictive and compulsive behavior patterns. Very loose rule of thumb is whatever we believe we are deprived of as children can easily become addiction in adulthood. For example, many people are addicted to attention. I'm referring to people who will do most anything to draw attention to themselves. The most common reason for this is that they believe they either didn't get enough attention when they were young or didn't get it when it was important to them. In any case, the deprivation becomes unresolved emotional energy that compels them to behave in ways that will satisfy the addiction. What's important for us to understand about these unreconciled denied impulses that exist in all of us is how they affect our ability to stay focused and take a disciplined, consistent approach to our trading. Okay, just wait a second. I'll have to insert text box. All right. The safeguards. To operate effectively in the trading environment, we need rules and boundaries to guide our behavior. It is a simple fact of trading that the potential exists to do enormous damage to ourselves, damage that can be way out of proportion to what we may think it is possible. There are many kinds of trades in which the risk of loss is unlimited. Hmm. When we are entering in a trade, okay, we can do all the analysis, we can do everything. But when it comes to entering, we need to have a predefined loss, the point where we need to exit, where our setup is not working anymore. And after that, being hopeful can for sure like do some damage in a longer term. For example, you enter in a trade at 100, okay? Now your target is 150 or so. All right. And you decided your SL to be at 80. Okay. Now the market went in your direction. From 100, it went up to 115 or 120, for an example. And I thought, okay, it will go up a little bit more. But later on, it stopped making higher highs, or like it basically stopped making the momentum in the favor, like in your favor. Okay. So then what happens? It'll go in the other way. It'll go opposite to your trade. And since your SL was 80, now it came very near to 80. And now it went slightly below 80, like it is at 79. But you're like, okay, it's at 79 only. It will come back to at least 115, 110. Then I'll exit. After some time, it'll go a little bit lower. It'll go up to 75. And you're like, okay, I'll wait. At least it'll come to my break even position. I'll cut the trade. Then it went a little lower again, 70. Your SL, decided SL before entering the trade was 80. Now you're at 70, but still hopeful that the market will turn around and it will give you money. At least even if it'll not give you money, it will not take any money of yours. So it will come break even. That's the hope. Now you're not seeing the market objectively. What is happening in the market? You're not observing it objectively. So then all of a sudden, downward momentum will come, and now you are at 60 or let's say 50, and you decided, okay, this loss is bigger than what I ideally should have taken, and you decided to close the position. And it all happens very quickly. The time pressure is also there, right? And that's why you need a set of rules to get out of such situations. And following the rules when you are in a winning position is very easy, but the real work of rule is to make you, what I can say, protected or not prone to the kind of loss or kind of damage you can do yourself emotionally and financially at the same time, because you decided SL to be 80. Now you close your position at 50. Then there is this pressure to overcome this loss, or recover this loss. Then you will end up entering in a trade where your setup is not there, but you just want to recover your money and quickly you want to do it. So you enter in another trade, you enter in another trade, and you end up losing more. And this vicious cycle will goes on and on and on. And by the end of the day, you'll realize, okay, that's way bigger of a loss. I shouldn't have done that, right? So that's what I'm talking about. Now, moving ahead, to prevent the possibilities of exposing ourselves to change, we need to create an internal structure in the form of specialized mental discipline and a perspective that guides our behavior so that we always act in our own best interest. This structure has to exist within each of us because, unlike society, the market doesn't provide it. Right? Let's go through it once again. To prevent the possibility of exposing ourselves to damage, we need to create an internal structure in the form of specialized mental discipline and a perspective that guides our behavior so that we always act in our own best interest. Now, this structure has to exist within each of us because, unlike society, the market doesn't provide it. Okay, the markets provide structure in the form of behavior pattern that indicates when an opportunity to buy or sell exists. But that's where the structure ends, with a simple indication. Otherwise, from each individual's perspective, there are no formalized rules to guide your behavior. There aren't even any beginnings, middles, or endings as there are in virtually every other activity we participate in. This is an extremely important distinction with profound psychological implications. The market is likely a stream that is in constant motion. It doesn't start, stop, or wait. Even when the markets are closed, prices are still in motion. There is no rule that a opening price on any day must be the same as the closing price the day before. Nothing we do in society properly prepares us to function effectively in such a boundaryless environment. Even gambling games have built-in structure that makes them much different from trading and a lot less dangerous. For example, if we decide to play blackjack, the first thing we have to do is decide how much we are going to wager or risk. This is a choice we are forced to make by the rules of the game. If we don't make the choice, we don't get to play. In trading, no one except yourself is going to force you to decide in advance what you risk it. In fact, what we have is a limitless environment where virtually anything can happen at any moment, and only the consistent winner define their risk in advance by advance of putting a trade. For everyone else, defining the risk in advance would force you to confront the reality that each trade has a probable outcome, meaning that it could be a loser. Consistent losers do almost anything to avoid accepting the reality that no matter how good a trade looks, it could lose, right? So, been there, done that. So, yeah, consistent losers, okay. Without the presence of an external structure forcing the typical trader to think otherwise, he is susceptible to any number of justification, rationalization, and the kind of distorted logic that will allow him to get into a trade believing that it can't lose, which make determining the risk in advance irrelevant. Time itself is a very big factor here because it distorts the way you are perceiving the market or you are going to perceive the market. Right. All gambling games have specified beginnings, middles, and endings based on a sequence of events that determine the outcome of the game. Once you decide you're going to participate, okay, just give me 1 second. Okay, we have already noted down. Once you decide you're going to participate, you can't change your mind. You're in for the duration. That's not true of trading. In trading, prices are in constant motion. Nothing begins until you decided it should. It lasts as long as you want, and it doesn't end until you want it to get to be over, regardless of what you may have planned or wanted to do. Any number of psychological factors can come into play, causing you to become distracted, change your mind, become scared or overconfident. In other words, causing you to believe in ways that are erratic and unintended. Because gambling games have a formal ending, they force their participant to be an active loser. If you're on a losing streak, you can't keep on losing without making a conscious decision to do so. The end of each game causes the beginning of a new game, and you may have to actively subject more of your assets to further risk by reaching into your wallet or pushing some chips to the center of the table. Trading has no formal ending. The market will not take you out of a trade unless you have the appropriate mental structure to end a trade in a manner that is always in your best interests. You can become a passive loser. This means that once you are in a losing trade, you don't have to do anything to keep on losing. You don't even have to watch. You can just ignore the situation and the market will take everything you own and even more. Right. I'm just, I can relate to this part. One of the many contradiction of trading is that it offers a great gift and curse at the same time. The gift is that perhaps for the first time in your lives, we are in a complete control of everything we do. The curse is that there is no external rules or boundaries to guide or structure our behavior. The unlimited characteristics of the trading environment require that we act with some degree of restraint and self-control, at least if we want to create some measure of consistent success. The structure we need to guide our behavior has to originate in our mind. As a conscious act of free will, this is where the problems begin. Right, right. The willingness to create rules. I have not yet encountered a person interested in trading who didn't resist the notion of creating a set of rules. I have not yet encountered a person interested in trading who didn't resist the notion of creating a set of rules. The resistance isn't always overt. Quite the contrary, it's usually very subtle. We agree on the one hand that rules make sense, but we really have no intention of doing whatever is being suggested. This resistance can be intense and it has logical source. Most of the structure in our mind was given to as a result of our social upbringing and based on choices made by other people. In other words, it was instilled in our minds but did not originate in our minds. This is a very important distinction. In the process of instilling structure, many of our natural impulses to move, express, and learn about the nature of our existence through our own direct expression were denied. Many of these denied impulses were never reconciled and still exist inside of us as frustration, anger, disappointment, guilt, or even hatred. The accumulation of these negative feelings act as a force inside our mental environment, causing us to resist anything that denies us the freedom to do and be whatever we want, what we want. In other words, the very reason we are attracted to trading in the first place, the unlimited freedom of creative expression, is the same reason we feel a natural resistance to creating this kind of rules and boundaries that can appropriately guide our behavior. It's as if we have found a utopia in which there is complete freedom, and then someone taps us on the shoulder and says, "Hey, you have to create rules. And not only that, you have also to have the discipline to abide by them." The need for rules may make perfect sense, but it can be difficult to generate the motivation to create these rules when we have been trying to break free of them most of our lives. It usually makes a great deal of pain and suffering to break down the source of our resistance to establishing and abiding by a trading regime that is originate or that is organized, consistent, and reflects prudent money management guidelines. Now, I'm not implying that you have to reconcile all of your past frustration and disappointments to become a successful trader, because that's not the case, and you certainly don't have to suffer. I've worked with many traders who have achieved their objectives of consistency and haven't done anything to reconcile their backlog of denied impulses. However, I'm implying that you can't take for granted how much effort and focus you may have to put into building the kind of mental structure that compensates for the negative effect denied impulses can have on your ability to establish the skills will assure you success as a trader. I'm implying that you can't take for granted how much effort and focus you may have to put into building the kind of mental structure that compensate for the negative effect denied impulses can have on your ability to establish the skills that will assure you as a successful trader. Okay, so now we are learning about the problems that comes our way. So problem one is creating the rules. Problem two, failure to take responsibility. Trading can be characterized as a pure and unencumbered personal choice with an immediate outcome. Remember, nothing happens until we decide to start. It lasts as long as we want and doesn't end until we decide to stop. All of these beginnings, middles, and endings are the result of our interpretations of the information available and how we choose to act on our perception or on our interpretation. Now, we may want the freedom to make choices, but that doesn't mean we are ready and willing to accept the responsibilities for the outcomes. Traders who are not ready to accept responsibility for the outcome of their interpretation and action will find themselves in a dilemma. How does one participate in any activity that allows complete freedom of choice, at the same time avoid taking responsibility if the outcome of one's choice are unexpected and not to one's liking? Makes sense, isn't it? Let me add another text box. Hmm. The hard reality of trading is that if you want to create consistency, you have to start from the premise that no matter what the outcome, you're completely responsible. Much needed. Be accountable. Make set of rules. Be accountable. Abide by them no matter what. To stay consistent and successful for the longer period of time. Okay. Hmm. This is a level of responsibility few people have aspired to before they decide to become traders. The way to avoid responsibilities is to adopt a trading style that is, to all intents and purposes, random. I define random trading as a poorly planned trades or trades that are not planned at all. It is an unorganized approach that takes into consideration an unlimited set of market variables, which do not allow you to find out what works on a consistent basis and what does not. Right, strategy, backtesting, everything. Why it is like much needed. Logic. I'm a logic-driven guy. Randomness is unstructured freedom without responsibility. What we trade when we trade without well-defined plans and with an unlimited set of variables, it's very easy to take credits for the trades that turn out of our liking because there was some method present. At the same time, it's very easy to avoid taking responsibilities for the trade that didn't turn out the way we wanted because there's always some variables we didn't know about and therefore couldn't take into consideration beforehand. If the market's behavior were truly random, then it would be difficult, if not impossible, to create consistency. If it's impossible to be consistent, then we really don't have to take responsibility. The problem with this logic is that our direct experience of the markets tells us something different. The same behavior patterns present themselves over and over again. Even though the outcome of each individual pattern is random, the outcome of a series of patterns is consistent, statistically reliable. This is a paradox, but one that is easily resolved with a disciplined, organized, and consistent approach. I've worked with countless traders who would spend hours doing market analysis and planning trades for the next day. Then, instead of putting on the trades they planned, they did something else. Been that and that. Now, the trades they didn't put on were usually ideas from friends or tips from brokers. I probably don't have to tell you that the trades they originally planned but didn't act on were usually the big winners of the day. Hell, yeah. This is a classic example of how we become susceptible to unstructured, random trading because we want to avoid responsibility. Hmm. Let me put another. Oh man. Okay, now it is fine. All right. In between, whenever I'm taking a pause or something like I'm on my own, you can skip for 5 to 10 seconds. I've like told you earlier also, and you can do it. But it'll hardly take 5 to 10 seconds. So if you want to stay, you can stay. When we act on our own ideas, we put our creative skills, ability at the time, and we get constant like on the time, and we get instant feedback on how well our ideas worked. It is very difficult to rationalize away any unsatisfactory result. On the other hand, when you are taking the random traits, on the other hand, when we enter an unplanned random trait, it's much easier to shift the responsibility by blaming the friend or the broker for their bad ideas or the market for that matter. Let's say you entered with the momentum and you didn't get the follow-up momentum that you were, seeking to get the what I can say, the profit and money basically, then you will blame the market. There's something else about the nature of trading that makes it easy to escape the responsibility that comes with creating structure in favor of trading randomly. It is the fact that any trader has the potential to be a winner, even a big winner. That big winning trade can come your way whether you are a great analyst or a lousy one, whether you don't do or don't or sorry whether you do or don't take responsibility. It takes effort to create the kind of disciplined approach that is necessary to become a consistent winner. But as you can see, it's very easy to avoid this kind of mental framework in favor of trading with an undisciplined random approach. Hmm. Okay, how many reasons are there, man? Two more problems. Okay. All right. So basically, there are four problems that we have catered so far. So we have already talked about not making the rules. What is the psychology behind it? And then there is the random traits that we enter on. Failure to take responsibility, FOMO traits and stuff. Right. And now we are on the third one. That is addiction to random rewards. Several studies have been done on the psychological effects of random rewards on monkeys. For example, if we teach a monkey to do a task and consistently reward it every time the task is done, the monkey quickly learns to associate a specific outcome with the efforts. If you stop rewarding it for doing the task, within a very short period of time, the monkey will simply stop doing the task. It won't waste its energy doing something that it has now learned it won't be rewarded for. However, the monkey's response to being cut from the reward is very different. If you start out on a purely random schedule instead of a consistent one, when you stop offering the reward, there's no way the monkey can know that it will never be rewarded again for doing the task. Every time it was rewarded in the past, the reward came as a surprise. As a result, from the monkey's perspective, there is no reason to quit doing the task. The monkey keeps on doing the task even without being rewarded for doing it. Some will continue indefinitely. I'm not sure why we are susceptible to becoming addicted to random rewards. If I had to guess, I'd say that it is probably has something to do with the euphoria inducing chemicals that are released in our brains when we experience an unexpected pleasant surprise. If a reward is random, we never know for sure if and when we might receive it. So expending energy and resources in the hope of experiencing that wonderful feeling of surprise again isn't difficult. In fact, for many people, it can be very addicting. On the other hand, when we expect a particular outcome and it doesn't come about, we are disappointed and feel bad. If we do it again and get the same disappointing outcome, it isn't likely that we'll keep on doing something we know will cause us emotional pain. Yesterday, I came across as a news like this is not related to trading, but this is in my mind since yesterday. So there is a junior of mine from Jawanodaya Vidyalaya, and he is like much junior to me, and now he's in IIT Bombay. So he posted a story that was about someone from his class attempted, not just attempted, but committed suicide. Now he's in IIT Bombay, one of the prestigious, or we can say the topmost college in our country, which has a great value in terms of our society, the great respect, and even in foreign countries as well. And to just be there, a lot of people do a lot of hard work to just become a person to secure a seat in IIT Bombay. Now there is this guy who did all the hard work, I'm assuming, because without hard work nobody can go to IIT Bombay. Now, there was this guy. I'm not really feeling good that I have to call. There was a guy because he's no more in this world. So there was this guy who was very, you know, keen to get into IIT Bombay because of the society, because of his own interest, whatever the reasons were, I'm not aware of. So let's say he did a lot of hard work, he did a lot of smart work, whatever was required, and he was able to crack the one of the prestigious exams, JEE means, right? Joint entrance exams, and then advance, and he has gone through all the process, and ultimately he secured one seat in the IIT Bombay, and he's now at the first or second semester to be very precise. Now, all of a sudden, we don't know, right? From the outside world, from his parents' perspective, he's doing great. He's in IIT Bombay. Everything is settled. Everything is very well secured and all. Now, one day, he just committed suicide all of a sudden. I saw the post that where my junior was more or less bashing the politics in the college when when where he was trying to say someone who was very close to him, someone who was in the same class, someone who encountered him, like he had to encountered with on a daily basis. He has to he communicated on a daily basis and is now not anymore in this world, and nobody even cares about it. So that's the harsh reality. Nobody cares about it. So go all in. Whatever you want to do in this life of yours, go all in, man. Do not hold yourself back. Because if you'll just go by the way society wants you to be, either you will end up like you'll get all the money or whatever you seek. Maybe you'll be happy. But personally, I'll feel like I'll not be the person who just, live by the societal pressures for the rest of my life. I want to do something that is of my choice. I do wanna become someone who is, working individually and who is on his own and who is doing business and who is living his life to the fullest, right? And nobody matters except the family. And after a point of time, family also expects certain things from you, right? So go all in. Just start. Carpe diem. Seize the day. And you'll ultimately figure out your way, right? A person who is just living a very simple life and, earning on daily basis small money, but he's happy, with his family, he's enjoying the small moments, and maybe he's not having all the luxuries in this world, but he's happy. And there is this guy who is in one of the prestigious colleges of the country. According to society, he was doing great, but he committed suicide, man. Isn't it itself explanatory that what are the things that we need as a human being to survive in this world, right? Okay, I can talk a lot and lot into that, but let's come back to this book of verse. Now, the problem with any addiction, okay, we were at this point, right? We are disappointed and feel bad. If we do it again and get same disappointing outcome, it isn't likely that we will keep doing something we know will cause an causes emotional pain. And again, another thing that I want to say is do not be afraid of failure. Even if you'll go like follow the spiritual scripture that is Bhagavad Gita. So there is this very famous sloka from it. If there is any mispronunciation, so I'm really sorry for it in advance. But it says Karmande Vadikaraste Ma Phale Sukadachana. That simply means do your thing, do your task, and do not, you know, what I can say, do not care about the result, do not care about the outcome. If it is in favor of you, great. If even it is not in favor of you, if you have gone all way in, that is completely fine because you have only control in your doings. You don't have any controls over outcome, right? So do your thing, go all in, and don't care about the result. It'll be catered by, it will be, taken care by the Almighty itself, Lord Krishna, right? And I feel and I believe in it. Just do your thing. Seize the day. Again, back to the square one. Carpe diem. Seize the day. Seize whatever is in hand, right? Hmm. Live the moment to the fullest. Now, the problem with, okay, now coming back to this book, the problem with any addiction is that it leaves us in a state of choicelessness to whatever degree the addiction dominates our mind, state of mind. To that same degree, our focus and efforts will be geared towards fulfilling the object of that addiction. Other possibilities that exist in any given moment to fulfill other needs, like the need to trust ourselves and not to subject too many of our assets to risk, are either ignored or dismissed. We feel powerless to act in any other way than to satisfy the addiction. And random and an addiction to random rewards is particularly troublesome for traders because it is another source of resistance to creating the kind of mental structure and produces consistency. Now I'll go through it once again. The problem, I hope you're not hearing the background noise. I really wish for it. But if, in case if you're doing it, I'm really sorry for it, okay? There's this niche and she's crying. I don't know the reason. Kids to cry, right? Hmm. The problems with any addiction is that it leaves us in a state of choicelessness. To whatever degree the addiction dominates our mind, state of mind, to that same degree our focus and efforts will be geared towards fulfilling the object of that addiction. other possibilities that exist in any given moment to fulfill other needs, like the need to trust ourselves and not to subject too many of our assets to risk, are either ignored or dismissed. We feel powerless to act in any other way than to satisfy the addiction. An addiction to random rewards is particularly troublesome for traders because it is another source of resistance to creating the kind of mental structure that produces consistency. That's the basically crux of it, right? See, you need to be very clear with what kind of outcome you want. If you want consistency, consistent profits, right? In that case, you have to go through it. One way or another, you have to. There is no substitute to it. There is no alternate to it. Right. Hmm. Now, the last problem, external versus internal control. Our upbringing has programmed us to function in a social environment, which means we are acquired certain thinking strategies to fulfilling our needs, wants, and desires that are geared towards social interaction. Not only have we learned to depend on each other to fulfill the needs, wants, and desires we cannot fulfill completely on our own, but in the process, we have acquired many socially based controlling and manipulating techniques for assuring that other peoples behave in a manner that is consistent with what we want. The markets may seem like a social endeavor because there are so many people involved, but they are not. If in today's modern society we have learned to depend on each other to fulfill basic needs, then the market environment, even though it exists in the midst of modern society, can be characterized as a psychological wilderness where it's truly every man or woman for himself or herself. Not only can we not depend on the market to do anything for us, but it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to manipulate or control anything that the market does. Now, if we have become effective at fulfilling our needs, wants, and desires by learning how to control and manipulate our environment, but suddenly find ourselves as traders in an environment that does not know, care, or respond to anything that is important to us, where does that leave us? You're right. If you set up proverbial creek without a paddle, right? Now, let's go through it once again. The markets may seem like a social endeavor because there are so many people involved, but they are not. If in today's modern society we have learned to depend on each other to fulfill basic needs, then the market environment, even though it exists in the midst of modern society, can be characterized as a psychological wilderness where it's truly every woman and man for himself or herself. Not only can we depend on the market to do anything for us, but it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to manipulate or control anything that the market does. Now, if you have become effective at fulfilling our needs, wants, and desires by learning how to control and manipulate our environment, but suddenly find ourselves as a trader in an environment that does not know, care, or respond to anything that is important to us, where does that leave us? You're right. If you set up the proverbial creek without a paddle, hmm, internal versus out. Hmm. One of the principal reasons so many people have failed miserably at trading is that their success is partly attributed to their superior ability to manipulate and control the social environment to respond to what they want. To some degree, all of us have learned or developed techniques to make the external environment conform to our mental environment. The problem is that none of these techniques work with the market. The market doesn't respond to control and manipulation unle- unless you're a very large trader. However, we can control our perception. Okay, there is a solution also to attest to it, right? Let's focus on the solution part. However, we can control our perception and interpretation of market information as well as our own behavior instead of controlling our surroundings so they conform to our idea of the way things should be. We can learn to control ourselves. Then we can perceive information from the most objective perspective possible and structure our mental environment so that we always behave in a manner that is in our own best interest. Very, very, very important. So that's the solution of it. Rather than trying to control and manipulate the market, control and manipulate yourself, right? Basically, so that you can get the desired results and act in the best possible way when you are in a trade or when you are trying to analyze things and stuff, right? And by this, we are coming to the end of this particular chapter. Yes, tomorrow we are going to talk about taking responsibility, like chapter 3. Now, if I'll give you a quick summary, what we have learned in this chapter. So we have started with, the very idea of, okay, just give me 1 second. The lure and the dangers of trading, like that was a common point that we have covered today. We understood about what are the lures. So first one is the attraction, right? Why we are getting attracted to the place, because it has limitless opportunities and there are less number of rules and stuff, and there are less resistance and you know less control over you. Basically, you are the one who is going to decide the rules for yourself. Then the dangers again with this same, bro, since there is no rules on you, then it can act as a danger as well. This unlimited, what I can say, unlimited place of getting a lot of unlimited, I'm exactly not getting that word, possibilities of success is also coming with a con, that is you can become reckless, right? So that is the danger basically. Now there comes the problems. Then we described the safeguards, like how can we do that, the safeguard thing. Then we identify the problem. So basically we have to identify the problem and we have to find out the right way to tackle it. And rather than controlling the market, we should control ourselves so that we can act in a certain manner and we can see the market in the best possible objective manner and will get the desired results, right? For a consistency and a long term profit and long term survival in the market. Problem, the willingness to create rules. Unwillingness, I guess. The willingness to create rules. Okay. Failure to take responsibility. Then we learned about addiction to random rewards. Then external versus internal conflict or control, right? So these are the things that we have covered today. And I hope it helped you in one way or another. Tomorrow we are going to talk about the taking responsibility part in more deeper manner. And we'll start with the third chapter from tomorrow itself. If you have come so far, thank you so much for being here. If you have any doubts, anything that you want to share, then yeah, you can do it in the comment box right up. So thank you so much and have a great day ahead. Thank you so much, Universe. Thank you so much, Radharanji. Peace out. Have fun.